I was a student of Delhi University a decade ago, and that's when I first got to know Hany Babu, because he was very active on issues of the way reservation policy of 27% OBC reservation was being scuttled after it came in 2007, and I was in Delhi University till 2009. So we were quite active against the scuttling of reservations. So that's when I got to know Hany Babu. I've not met him in the recent past, but I've known of his activism since more than a decade. One thing I was aware of, because that was a struggle that was happening while I was a student of Delhi University, which was that OBC reservations were introduced in higher education in 2007. There was a casteist sort of counter reaction to that, and people were in different educational institutes, people, upper castes, so-called upper castes, and organizations that believe in caste supremacy, which were sort of behind the scenes. It was the BJP and the RSS and the ABVP that was calling the shots, but from the front there was this organization called the Youth for Equality that was leading the so-called agitation against the implementation of reservations. And I remember that they were so casteist that they would, as a mark of protest, they would take out brooms and they would start cleaning the college and say that, well, because now these people are coming to the universities and we will not be able to get admission because of reservations, so we might as well clean the college just like they otherwise clean colleges. So the sweepers are coming here, so we will become sweepers. So all of that kind of very casteist counter reaction was happening, and we were firm that this is a constitutional right for the injustices that have happened and that are happening even now, and this is a very important step towards the democratization of knowledge production. But what they were doing in the initial years, beyond these street protests, the university administrations in Delhi University and subsequently in Jawaharlal Nehru University also, they found a cut-off method to sort of ensure that seats don't get fulfilled. And when seats don't get fulfilled, you convert that into general seats. So that was happening, and that is something that we fought against, both politically on the streets as well as legally in the court. And we won those victories, and we ensured that reservation is implemented. But come Narendra Modi in 2014, by this time I was already in JNU, reservation policy is once again being scuttled. It's blatantly unconstitutional. The reign of the BJP government with Narendra Modi as the Prime Minister since 2014 has been synonymous with an unprecedented level of attack on dissent in India. And I think it needs to be contextualized in the anti-people policies of this government. A key agenda of that anti-people policies is the anti-education and anti-student agenda of the BJP and the RSS. They want to capture educational institutes, be it by planting their own puppets as vice chancellors or as heads of institutes, and also want to target all voices of opposition to such an agenda. Which is why you saw what began in Hyderabad Central University in January 2017, after that in JNU in February 2016, January 2016, then February 2016. And after that they have coined this new term that is anti-national, after which they coined another term that is urban Naxal. So this has sort of become blanket terms to target each and every voice that is critical of the regime and that is actively opposing the regime. So it began with Sudhir Dhawale and Ambedkarite activists in Bhima Koregaon. Before that, Rohit Vemula in Hyderabad Central University, us in JNU. Now many more activists have been arrested. So these are all attempts to intimidate voices of opposition, voices of dissent, and each arrest and each raid is supposed to have a chilling impact on others to sort of make them go into silence. So that is how I understand this attacks on human rights activists. 2 points. The first point is that these people are important voices, even though they might not be part of a big movement, but they are important voices opposing the casteist agenda of the government. If you look at the way social justice is being scuttled, if you look at the way our university curriculum is being rewritten, if you look at the way people from marginalized and deprived communities are coming under attack in the university spaces as well as outside, these people have been voices who have come out openly to expose the anti-people, anti-Dalit, anti-Adivasi, anti-minority agenda of the government. Be it against what is happening in the Adivasi areas, be it the atrocities that are happening on Dalits, be it the cases of mob violence that is happening on Muslims, each of these voices has been voices who is opposed to the Hindutva agenda of the BJP. And everyone who is opposed to the Hindutva agenda of the BJP is a potential urban Naxal or a potential anti-national for the state and for the BJP regime, and they want to incarcerate everyone. And as I said, that incarcerating one produces a chilling effect on many others to sort of make them go into silence. The second point is that if you look at and follow the case in which they've arrested about 10 human rights activists from Sudha Bardawaj to Arun Ferreira to Varavara Rao and others, many more raids have happened. They've been trying to arrest Gautam Navlakha, they've been trying to arrest Anil Tiltumde. There was a raid recently at Professor Hany Babu's house. This is a big conspiracy that is served to have many ends as its aim. One aim, as I said, is to sort of suppress voices of dissent. The other aim is also to brand people from marginalized communities, Dalits and Adivasis, and their voices as sponsored by the Naxalites and as being part of a violent revolution which is spreading violence in the society, which is far from the truth. I mean, as you yourself said, that Professor Hany Babu was fighting for OBC reservations legally. He was raising his voice against the scuttling of social justice, which is a democratic right of every citizen. In fact, the scuttling of social justice is unconstitutional. What Professor Hany Babu was doing was upholding the constitution. But if you look at the very essence of this government, it's anti-constitution. It wants to do away with the very notion of equality that is enshrined in the constitution. They believe in the caste system. They believe in Manusmriti. They believe in Manuvad. They believe that your place in the society is determined by where you are born. And to push forward that agenda, it's very important to, if you can't suppress them directly, it's very important for us to delegitimize voices that are speaking out. And that work of delegitimization and that work of branding has been outsourced by the regime to its propaganda channels. So if you look at propaganda channels, they've been doing this since 2015, that they've been branding every voice of dissent. Let's not forget, Rohit Vemula was called anti-national. We were called anti-national. Now Sudha Bardawaj is being called urban Naxal. Tomorrow you can be called anti-national. You just simply talk about basic issues. You try to hold the BJP government accountable for its agenda that itself presented in 2014 before the general elections. You will be called anti-national. You start thinking you will be called anti-national. So this is a way of intimidation. But if this intimidatory tactics are supposed to silence us, it has only produced the opposite effect. So after every arrest, there are more voices that are speaking up. How many people will you put in jail? How many people will you kill, like Gauri Lankesh or Dhabolkar or Pansare or Professor Kalburgi? You kill one, you arrest one, there are thousands of other people who are going to stand up and fight for justice, against injustice. Because, you know, it's a life and death question for us. If social justice is not implemented in university spaces, many students from marginalized communities will never be able to access education. They will be deprived of education. That's what's been happening for centuries. It cannot go on. When Narendra Modi became the Prime Minister in 2014, as far as I remember, there were dark clouds all over. People were silent. People were not speaking up back then as well. In 2014, things started changing from 2015 onwards. After the murder and lynching of Muhammad Akhlaq in Dadri, that's when the first voices of opposition started emerging from within the civil society. Many filmmakers, many writers, many artists returned their state awards. Around the same time, one of the first people to become the opposition on the streets to the BJP were the students, and that is because they came after every university. It began in FTII, before that even in IIT Madras, then FTII, then the way they took away fellowships. Once again an agenda to deprive people from marginalized communities from accessing higher education. Then they went after Rohit Vemula and his comrades of the Ambedkar Students Association in HCU. And then they came after JNU. But each of these attacks, if you look at it, they were supposed to sort of intimidate us into silence, but they built solidarities amongst different people. I did not know people in Hyderabad Central University before 2016. But that movement, the attack on HCU and then subsequently the attack on JNU brought us together. I did not know people in FTII, but those attacks brought us together. I did not know many other people within the civil society all across the country, but the attacks in different places have brought us together. And one thing is very clear, that they may have found the formula to win elections, which is aided by big data analytics, which is aided by propaganda through mass media, which is aided by a campaign of hate and polarization. But the BJP regime has not found a formula to control mass protests, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Even in the second regime of BJP, though it's still very early days, and if you compare it to 2014, you would see that there were not as many people speaking out as they are now. After the lynching of Tabriz Ansari, there were protests in more than 70 cities. Thousands of people came out on the streets. American Indians and Indians living in Europe, they came out and they protested against the way these mob lynchings have been sanctioned by the regime and how mob lynchers are being given impunity by the regime. If you look at the Narmada Bachao Andolan, they've been fighting there against the way villages are being submerged. So voices of opposition, protests, mass movements, I don't see them subsiding. What I see continuing is that there will be false arrests. What I see continuing is that dissent will be targeted. Dissidents will be called anti-national. But that's not going to stop movements, because movements are existing because injustice is there, and this regime is in power to perpetuate injustices. I mean, you just look at what has happened in Kashmir with the abrogation of Article 370. You just look at what's happening in Assam with the NRC, and now the BJP is saying that they're going to implement countrywide NRC. They're planning to disenfranchise people. You think people are going to remain silent and not fight for their constitutional rights? That's not going to happen. We are going to fight for constitutional rights of everyone. Let me assure you that this intimidation is not going to work. Yes, we will fight legally. When it is required, we will go to courts. But we will also fight it on the streets. We will keep the banner of dissent alive in India. See, the biggest contribution of Narendra Modi and the biggest achievement of Narendra Modi since 2014 has been the way he lies and the way his regime lies. I mean, from day one, they've lied about so many things. I mean, they've lied about the videos of JNU, they are lying right now about this entire case. And they lie about unemployment figures, they lie about, or they try to conceal the data of farmer suicides or about the lynchings. But people are smart enough. They understand, they can distinguish the truth from falsehood. Right now, they are simply operating, and they're not even original. This is simply copy-pasting the tactics of Hitler's propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, who said, repeat a lie 100 times, it will become the truth. But we are not going to let that become. If you're going to repeat a lie 100 times, we are going to assert the truth 1,000 times. See, the organizer would be in a better position to explain it in detail, but what I gathered from my presence as a speaker on 31st December 2017 in Pune at Shaniwarwada, one misconception people have is that this was a meeting of Dalits. The point is, yes, Dalits were there, and Dalit organizations, Ambedkarite organizations were in the forefront of organizing this Elgar Parishad, but they were not the only ones. Elgar Parishad saw the coming together of many marginalized groups, many dispossessed groups. There were Adivasi organizations there were LGBT organizations there were Muslim organizations there were organizations that were fighting against displacement of Adivasis who were also part of it, and there were also Maratha organizations who were a part of this. So the attempt of, right now if you look at Maharashtra, it raised questions, the Elgar Parishad raised questions of the attacks Dalits and minorities are facing. It also foregrounded the question of agrarian crisis that is devastating lives of farmers in Maharashtra and elsewhere as well. And if you look at that agrarian crisis in Maharashtra, both Marathas as well as Dalits are victims of that agrarian crisis. But to divert attention away from this question of agrarian crisis that is devastating both Maratha and Dalit livelihoods, the politics in Maharashtra, the mainstream politics in Maharashtra, especially the politics of Shiv Sena and the BJP, has been trying to sort of pit the Marathas versus Dalits, and which is also leading to atrocities on Dalits. So this coming together of these groups somewhere threatens the social engineering that the ruling party in Maharashtra as well as the center tries to engineer to win elections. And which is why I believe they branded this meeting falsely as being done or being sponsored by the Maoists. The point is, this meeting was organized by two retired High Court judges of the Bombay High Court, Justice P.B. Sawant and Justice Kolse Patil. They are on record saying that we are the organizers of this program. Justice Kolse Patil called me for that meeting. I went on his invitation. To brand Justice Kolse Patil, who's a retired High Court judge, as a Naxalite or as an urban Naxal or as part of some Naxal conspiracy is absolutely ridiculous. Makes absolutely no sense. But this government makes no sense. Anyone who opposes this government becomes an anti-national. I mean, a nation is made up of its people. And we were talking about the rights of people, the 12,000 farmers who are committing suicide every year. The victims of the Una atrocity that are not being denied justice. Rohit Vemula's mother, Radhika Amma, was there. She was talking about how she has been denied justice. Soni Sori was there talking about what's happening to Adivasis in Chhattisgarh. Talking about injustice is the highest form of patriotism according to me. You cannot brand us anti-national. We will not take it lying down. I think Elgar Parishad is a very good model of the resistance that we need to visualize and we need to operationalize on the ground in the coming days against this regime. All oppressed groups, all those groups who are opposed to the fascist, to the casteist agenda of the BJP and the RSS need to come together. Be it Dalits, be it minorities, be it LGBTQ people, be it Adivasis, and be it people who believe in progressive ideas. And Elgar Parishad brought all of them together. And just see, they came together once, and the way it threatened the regime, that it went after so many human rights activists. It tried to delegitimize the meeting. It tried to delegitimize the demands of that meeting, the conclusion of that meeting. I remember when that meeting ended, all of us took an oath. There were more than 25,000 people in the crowd that day. All of us took an oath on the Constitution of India that we will fight to protect the Constitution of India, and we will never vote for this anti-constitutional force that is the BJP in our lives. This is what they're scared of. This unity of progressive people is what they're scared of. This unity of marginalized, this unity of oppressed is what they're scared of. But this unity of oppressed is going to be there in the coming days as well.